Well, thank you, Simon, for sitting down with me. It's good to have you here.
It's great to be here, Alex. First time to have a podcast with you, so very excited.
For people that are listening to this and don't know you, could you give a brief introduction as to who you are and then the public company you're here representing?
Absolutely. My name's Simon Deacon. I'm CEO of Light Science Technology Holdings PLC. We joined the market coming up to 4 years ago, so I don't know where the time's gone, but it's gone very quickly. And my background has been in building companies up. I started in '92 with my first business, and it was in lighting. And then from there, I moved into electronics and also construction side of the business. And then more recently, it's been in ag tech and passive fire protection. And really the link across all our companies and what I've been involved in is building business up or starting them. It has been very much technology driven, if it be energy saving part of it. So yeah, I've been doing that for over 30 years and really enjoyed the different dynamic of different businesses and what they bring to the table and the people within them.
Yeah, great. So, first couple of questions that I ask everyone. First one, what is thinking specifically about your role as a public leader and facing the market, what is the best piece of advice that you've received?
The best piece of advice, so it's a good question. And I think the best piece of advice leading a public company is not to rush into any quick decision.
Yeah.
It's very easy there's a lot going on, and especially how we all work today at a high speed. And I think that, it's very important to digest the information that you're getting and from there make the decision off the back of it. I think too often you see today a lot of people making very quick decisions,
right,
and then that coming back at a later date, which is really having an effect on either them or the business. And I think it's just making sure that you take your time, you digest the information, and then make the right decision.
So something I've heard a lot is, and I want to see if this is the same thread that you're pulling on here, that it can be quite easy running a public company to get into a situation where the market is driving the business rather than the other way around. And by that I mean, like in Australia, in say resources, this comes up a lot where frustrated junior miners feel that they are doing things just to get another RNS announcement, or they're doing things to appease the market, and they end up making quick decisions that are more short-term market focused rather than sticking to their knitting and maintaining that longer-term lens. Is that similar or a bit different to what you're saying?
A little bit. I think we separate. We've got some good people on our board, and I very much separate the investment side and public life to running day-to-day companies. We are lucky enough to have divisional heads or managing directors in each division that we're involved in, and they get on with the day-to-day strategy of the business. And from my point of view, it's about making sure that, in some respects, I protect them from that, as much as we make sure we give them a public face, that they're seen, and we're doing the same podcasts and material and videos. It's important that I protect them from that so they can get on with the day-to-day. I think sometimes, the city, obviously wants lots of RNSs, but the difference with RNSs, you can have poor quality RNSs. Last year we did over 20 RNSs during the year, and that's great, and you've got to have the information and everything coming through to make them worthwhile. Right. But if people hear them too often, then they're going to get bored. So they want more detail, the more depth in an RNS, which is worthwhile. And I think they would rather have those type of RNSs rather than being pushed to constantly send something out, which is probably not really that relevant and it's not going to have that impact.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot of companies fall into the trap of how do we communicate as wide as possible, as frequently as possible, and miss the impact.
Yeah.
And so impact is just as important.
It is, and you can see when you can put an RNS out to say that you've won £1 million worth of contracts, and it has little effect.
Yeah.
You can put out that you've got a brand new website, and everybody's excited about it,
Yeah.
and it has more of an impact. So it's difficult to gauge, but you do your best, and we have a very long sheet of what we predict's coming, and we work on that and send them out accordingly.
So let's flip it. What about the worst piece of advice that you've received?
Worst case, worst really advice I've been is, I suppose it's very similar to the first question you gave me, but I remember doing an acquisition of a business which was based in Torquay, and I was brought in probably quite late to making going in and looking at this business, and they wanted a very, very quick decision. And I thought, wow, it's a lot to take on. It was a different sector than I was used to, and I thought, but there was a great opportunity. And at the time, I took it on and acquired the business, but didn't do my due diligence well enough. And so suddenly you find skeletons in the closet, which you weren't expecting. And that then turns into a lot of hard work, because you have to be focused. You have to make sure that you turn the business round and make sure it's going in the right direction, and iron out the issues which you might have. So it's very much don't go in full steam. You learn over the years, as I have, and anybody who's leading a business. You learn on the route, and you learn from your mistakes, and it's important that you do learn from those mistakes.
I like that. It's a good bit of advice. Okay, so projecting ahead. Last 4 years, you've seen a lot. It's been a tough market. You've had good advice, you've had bad advice, you've made quick decisions, you've made slower decisions. If you were putting out a crystal ball and projecting ahead, what sort of skills do you think will be important for someone in your position running a public company in 5 years' time? Skills that might not be as important or pronounced in 2025?
I think that, the world's changed and changed at a rapid rate. But I would say in the last 10 years to 15, it hasn't changed that much. And what I mean by that is that when I started business, we were using fax machines. We still had post, and those were the parts we communicate. And we'd use the phone, we'd talk. As time went on, emails came through, the internet, how we search and how we do things. And I think now what's really going to change for anybody coming in 5 years' time is AI. I think it's already affecting our lives and we see it. I think a lot of leaders don't necessarily use the tool, and we're all learning on the way, like we did with a simpler version of emails. But I do think that in the next 5 years, AI is going to be making more decisions, which could be worrying. But I think any person coming into the public world, you need to be an all-round. You need to understand and be an all-round figure. And what I mean by that is, not just understand your business, understand the markets. And we come in a little bit green. As much as I had 30 years in the private sector, you do come in green to the public world.
There's no manual.
There's no manual. There's nobody to hold your hand. And maybe that should be published a little bit more. And there's a great career out for people who have done it all and gone through all the markets to actually, coach you through, what is good and what is bad. And it's important to get an individual to help you with that who has experience in, not back in the 80s or the 90s in the market, but today's, because it has changed a lot.
Good point.
And it's important that you get the right individual to coach you through and learn that. But you need to be an all-rounded individual, and you need to be able to see through what is, if you like, real and what is fake.
Another way that you could learn about public markets is also by listening to the podcast and all the great stories and inspirational leaders we're helping from. But I love that point that in the grand scheme of things, the cycles of change have been quite long in the last few decades. They're getting shorter and shorter. Yeah. I mean, even within AI, and I don't want to spend the whole conversation talking about AI, but even within the cycles of AI, there's things that were around 2 years ago that have already been disrupted. And I think what's going to happen is those cycles will constrict and get shorter and shorter, and something that is the best practice for doing a webinar or dealing with an investor or whatever it is will just change so rapidly that the skill will not be in the technology, but it will be in adapting to change.
Yes.
Which I think is what you're saying. Be very good at the unknown.
Yeah.
And be willing to throw out the book. And my editorial comment on this is don't just do what worked in the 80s and 90s, because this isn't the 80s and 90s.
No, and we've moved on, haven't we? And you have to embrace change.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to do that. But I think if you've got the experience within your team, then that's you adapt to the change and make the decisions from it. But I think the next 5 years is certainly going to be a very exciting time. I think the markets have been depressed for some time, as we all know, and probably, if anything, it's the best time to be in it. I started my career coming out of a recession, and it feels some respects the markets have been in a recession, and the dilution of companies on AIM has been amazing compared to what number of companies were on AIM and how many are on there now. Yet there isn't the pool of investors there used to be either. But I do believe that will return.
Well, history tells us the best time to build a resilient business is during a recession, not during a boom period. So it bodes well. It
does bode well, and certainly, I think with something like that, you have to knuckle down. You have to control your costs, and so when it does turn, you're in good shape for that growth.
So one thing we spoke about at the dinner that I want to move on to now, you were telling me about a direct-to-consumer, or two things. You were telling me about a direct-to-consumer brand that you had come across, and how they were building community around the release of, I think they make helicopters.
Yes.
And they were talking about how they've built their own app, and they're using video and direct engagement to bring potential customers and stakeholders on the journey of their product formation.
Yeah.
And that was very cool. And you were sort of talking about that through the context of how can you bring some of that community, which to be honest is quite an American thing. Like a lot of American public companies do this very well, but how do you bring some of that to light science? Prior to that conversation, we'd also spoken separately about how, what would it be, 18 months ago, you embarked on a journey with light science to engage more with the market and do a lot more and really get proactive about it rather than reactive. I hope that's a fair comment.
Yes, absolutely. Fair comment.
Before we dive into the details of that, let's go back 18 months. Why did you sit down and decide we need to do more? What drove that?
I think we, very early on, we noticed the market was not there. It was struggling. We've all seen that. And so how do you reach a smaller audience who might invest in you when there is still quite a number of companies that they can invest in? And how do you stand out from the rest? And that's really where technology comes in, and using that technology. And I think it was, we floated the business when the pandemic was on. So we were doing all the
tough
process.
Times.
Yeah, huge tough times. And all I was stuck in with a computer, my laptop and my head within it. So I think we thought to stand back and, when we joined the market, somebody said to me, you really ought to get an RNS out once a month. That's what you do. And we pretty much did that, but it wasn't that exciting. And I thought, well, who's reading them? What platform are they going on? And then you read some of and we also get advised not to read any of the chat from retail investors, if you like. But you do read some of the chat because you want to know what they're looking at, how they feel. And so how can you embrace them and how can you get the story across? In an RNS, it's really governed of what you can say, how you get it out there.
Sanitized document.
Oh, it is, and in some respects, very frustrating. So how do you change and adapt that? And so creating shorts is really a good way of doing that. Doing your own interview or doing an interview with somebody who's asking the right questions so you can frame it in a verbal way, as well as through a video. And I think what we see is a changing audience. You've gone past the days where people sit there and they just pick out the key aspects of an RNS. They don't read all of it. And don't get me wrong, some investors do. But what you find is if you're doing it verbally, somebody can listen to it. And so what I mean is that they can be going on a run and they can physically listen to it. And what we're finding with the audience today, the more visual. They want to see something which is visual and engaging. And that's just not me sitting in a room talking. It's also bringing up images of what it might look like, what you're trying to explain in your RNS. And if you put all that together, I think then more people are more likely to take notice of you and then hopefully invest in you.
So what it sounds like is 18 months ago, you took a step back, had a look at the first, what would have been 2.5 years at that point, and said, we've done more or less what we've been told, but we haven't had the cut through. And then and did you do this independently? So you independently essentially you went back to first principles.
Yes.
And you tried to put yourself, what I'm hearing is you tried to put yourself in the shoes of the investor, which is exactly what in an operating business you would do to increase your revenue. You would sit there and say, what is the customer journey? How do people find our business? What is the first touch point they have? How do they get from hearing about the company through to buying whatever we're selling? And so it sounds like you went through that mental exercise, but substituted in investors. And where that led you was, well, one, the way people, which I 100% agree with, the way people digest information is just fundamentally different. No one advertises using large slabs of text anymore.
No.
The way people the newspaper has become a series of shorts.
Yes.
Like the way people receive any information, and it doesn't matter whether you're 18 or 85, and even at 85, it's still, the data tells us, it's still primarily video.
Yeah.
And so you went on that journey and said, well, perhaps we need to adapt. And I think you've done a great job at this. Surprisingly, one of the few in the UK that has fully gone on this journey. And it's, I think, even more impressive that you did it pretty much on your own, as in the catalyst for this was you.
Yeah.
So having now gone through that journey and trying to think about the other public leaders that might be listening to this now, it's pretty clear why you did it. It's pretty clear that it has value. Looking back on it, and it never ends, so it's not done, but what worked very well that you would say, if you were doing this, you simply must consider this? What are 3 things that work very well?
I think number 1 is whenever you're sending out an RNS, do a visual to it, do a short. I think that's really important. Key, making sure that image gets out there. So it might be the product, it might be the amount of the contract, it might be what market it's going into and how the end user really appreciates it. So people can go, wow, I understand the whole process within 2.5 seconds. And that's the audience you've got. And I think if you can do that, that's probably number 1. I think number 2 is then going on to do an interview and just giving a bit more flavour and detail to that RNS that you've put out there and the image that you're putting out there. So giving a bit more detail to it so it backs it up. You have to remember that you're trying to lead everybody to your website at the end of the day. So whatever you put out there on whatever platform, what you're trying to achieve is that they see that and go, what a company is that? Right, I need to find out more detail. I'll go to the website. You go to the website, yes, you see the RNS, and yes, you see the short. Okay, I want a bit more depth. Well, then there's the interview. And then from there, we're going to do a third part, which is a bit more in depth it might be with the MD of that particular division and me interviewing them, or our COO making sure that he interviews them, the individuals, and get a bit more depth. So, as much as I lead the way, if you like, in the city as a CEO of Light Science Technology Holdings, is also make sure the other team members come in and people can see the depth to a business. We employ a lot of people. We're across the country, and it's important people see that depth and what we do and how we go about entering the markets with the products that we design and manufacture.
I think that last point in particular, fantastic, because particularly for individual investors, yes, they're investing in a business that they fundamentally think will grow and become more valuable, but particularly for a growth company, It's about the vision, the people, and that extends beyond you. You're very important, of course, but they want to know the business and feel comfortable that the business has the capacity to execute on their stated goals. And I think putting other parts of the business in front of the camera, in front of the market, is a really sort of easy trick that not a lot of people do. But I think that's... Have you had any trouble convincing a divisional head? Because it's tough to get in front of camera, particularly at the start. Have any of them said, "Oh God, Simon, I really don't want to do that"?
I think all of us do. We don't set out when you don't set out to be in front of the camera. I never thought I'd be in public life, and I never thought I would be in front of the camera. I'd be quite happy behind it if is a key. But times change and you adapt, and I think people, when you talk, if there's a mistake, there's a mistake. Yeah. We're humans. It's natural. Yeah, we're not editing it to cut it out. So I think people have started to become more used to it. We've created our own media room with camera setups to make it as easy as possible, but also to make sure they feel at home. I mean, it's interesting, I can be on a 27th floor in all my health and safety gear, hard hat, boots, high-vis jackets, and then the following day I can be standing in a glass house, still with health and safety gear on, but you change the environment, and a camera can be, you're in front of that camera explaining what's happening, and you get used to it. But I think there's an amount which is required to bring them in, but don't disturb the day job, and then there's an amount where it's important that people see the team, because it isn't just me, it's the team, doing all that valuable work.
So as you're going on this journey, something that I hear a lot when we start talking with companies, particularly if they haven't more proactively engaged retail before, is they say, well, Alex, in the past, we've been told by our advisors that you simply mustn't talk to retail, and that what you should do is you do 2 webinars a year, you put out your RNS announcements, and that's it. And any spare time you have, spend it talking to the brokers or talking to institutional investors. I think that's terrible advice. Did you get any pushback from, and you can be careful to de-identify, you can say as much as little as you want here, but have you ever had any pushback from, say, more traditional parts of the market saying, Simon, no, this is not how we do it, don't engage with retail?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I hear it. I heard it. I was in London last week doing investor rounds and seeing our investors and new investors, and you get advice, and that very much that don't talk to your.
Why do you think they say that?
I think because traditionally they don't want you to say something that you might regret, maybe.
But you could say that over lunch within institutions.
Yeah, of course you could do. But I think for me, I totally agree with you, by the way, is that I think we should embrace it. The world's changed.
Yeah.
We're all about communication, and we're constantly on our phones and our laptops and all the other devices on a whole plethora of platforms. You need to get the information out there. And I think if the information is consistent with the message that you were sending out, then I think you should talk to your investors. Now, you can't talk to everybody because there isn't the time in the day to do it, but you can send out a message which is, I believe, is clear. And don't get me wrong, I get emails from investors now wanting more information, and they have to remember I can only give what is already public knowledge. I can't give something which isn't, so you do have to be careful. But I think if it's channeled in the right manner, I think we have to lift the lid on all of this. Yeah. And I think we have to communicate better. And I think there's nothing wrong with communicating directly. And I think that's what we should be doing.
Incredible. I think to add to that, because I'm very passionate about this, one, it's also a case of if we don't do it, someone else will. Like the truth is, particularly the UK, companies here and being listed here is often compared to America. Companies that will do this, and they will do it without hesitation. Americans love getting in front of the camera. And so if we don't do it, someone else will. And we then can't complain when money, particularly retail money, chooses to go to a market that's actually trying to attract it. Yeah. and then say, well, my God, there's no liquidity. Well, what are we doing to fix it? And so I think that's really important. Second one, around the compliance side, because I think this is massively misunderstood. When you became the director of a public company, I imagine, probably run by your Nomad, you did AIM directors training or some equivalent.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you go through a whole plethora of
Exactly.
process.
Anyone that is a director of a public company should know what they are allowed to say and not allowed to say. And if they don't, then they should go get that training.
Yeah.
And so I think this view that it's too risky is a bit misguided, because you should have that skill, because you need to use it when you reply to an email or sit down for lunch or wherever. But also, if you're doing it through pre-recorded interviews or things like that, you can just edit it.
Exactly, and it's the same way as an email. You're
Right.
quite right. You can. Somebody could have sent you an email and they want to know X and Y, and you think, can I say that? Am I allowed to say that? And what you can do is go and fact check that, make sure.
Go ask
can
you
I?
that, yeah.
And then reply. So there's no reason why you can't. And I think that's what people want to see today. There's nothing worse than seeing something on the chat and they just haven't got it. I think more recently we saw somebody had invested in us, or they said they'd invested in us on this chat, and they were saying, well, I didn't see that on the website. And I was thinking, well, it's all on the website. But then I clocked that actually the individual was probably looking at the wrong website, to appreciate that we've got 3 divisions, so we'll have 3 websites for those divisions for customer facing, and then we've got our holdings company website, and they weren't talking to the right or looking at the right website. Now, the easiest thing would have been to me to go on that platform, registered, and say, go and have a look at this website. All I would have to do, not get into a big conversation about it, just go and have a look at this website. But it's that power of people are out there, they're looking, they want the information, it's pointing them in the right direction.
Exactly. So part of this, and part of the emergence of retail as a segment of the market that is very important, is also the fact that the population is changing. The demographics of the investment community are changing. And this is something you and I have spoken offline about before, but I think it's worth talking about here. There are a lot of younger investors now, and by younger, I'm saying anyone that's younger than 45, which is a broad category. But the truth is, there is an enormous segment of the population in the UK that is under 45, that has a lot of money, that isn't necessarily asset rich yet, but I think they call them Henrys, high income, not rich yet. A lot of people that make good money that don't have 3 family homes, that are looking to build wealth, and also because of all of the shifts technologically and socially we've seen, are more inclined to invest than perhaps the other generation that's more risk averse. So really the ideal target customers, but not often targeted. Is this something you've thought about?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we do video content. The demographic of people that you see at shows and events tend to be elderly, and they're investing, and I suppose to them it becomes a bit of a hobby to some extent. You're investing, you're obviously trying to make money, or investing your money wisely into various stocks, and that's why they attend the shows that we go to. I think we saw a big change, and it was before we were on public markets, was very much when digital currency, Bitcoin, came along, and the younger generation, I believe, got it. They were there, they were investing in it, and they saw huge returns. Don't get me wrong, they go up and they go down, but they saw huge returns very quickly. And the stock market needs to react to that, because how much governance is there in Bitcoin, and who owns it, and how is it governed, compared to the stock exchange and listed companies. We're governed heavily. So your assets are, your money is more secure in that part, if you like, because it is governed. It has got restrictions to it, and I think that's the big difference. So we're seeing the audience change, and I think we've got to open that audience up so that we can get investment, because you're building a foundation. I think you've got to remember that you know, investors can be with you on your journey today, and you hope that they make money on the way, but it doesn't mean they're going to be with you in another 10 years' time. You know, they jump in and they jump out. You know, you see quite a lot of that in retail. So it's important that you build the foundation for the next lot coming in, and you build upon that, and that's, you know, video content, audio content, and getting the message out there.
I think consistent theme throughout the chat so far is the way that people buy things is different.
Yeah.
So the way that people buy shares also needs to be different.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what I think it sounds like the journey you've gone is starting to update the way that you as a public company markets and finds new investors to match the way those investors are actually making decisions.
Yeah.
Which is very different. And so final point on that, just very quickly, 1, 2, 3 quick points on looking back on the last 18 months. What are some things with the benefit of hindsight, or to someone listening, that you wouldn't have done or that you'd do differently if you were doing it again?
I haven't had much training in being in front of the camera or staff, but thank you. But I think, you know, I think sometimes it's good to get training. I think you have to find a level of making sure that people are understanding you and what you're about, and also making sure they've got a bit of depth and history about yourself, because you can be talking, but who are you, I think is really important. So I think having an amount of training is useful. I think don't be frightened, you know, don't be frightened to go and experiment. As I mentioned earlier, we are all human, so don't be frightened to get out there and see a public face. You touched on earlier a company I mentioned, and they'd created an app and they were doing video content. They were virtually providing, the CEO was providing virtually, you know, when he comes to his videos, from getting in the car that morning and going through that whole process. And I think, you know, that gives people depth of what sort of individual you are, and, you know, the detail that you're going into, and you're showing them, you know, day in the life of that individual running his business.
Are you going to do a day in the life of?
Possibly. I think we'd consider it. I think we'd film it and see what it looks like. You're always worried to do things new, but it gives that depth. You know, the old days you used to go and have lunch with somebody and get to know them, but how do you do that for an investor? And you can't go for lunch with them. You do invite them to capital markets days and have that better relationship. But there again, you're presenting something which is, you know, a script, a presentation. There's no, you know, proper depth of that individual and their experience, and until you talk to them afterwards. So I think if you can do that, I think that really helps get the younger generation especially to know what the business is all about and the individuals who are in it.
I think that's good advice. I mean, what you've touched on there is something that has really come about as a result of the rise of, I guess, influencer marketing, this concept of a parasocial relationship, where it's essentially a viewer, listener, audience member can get to know someone without having ever met them. And it's the feeling people have with celebrities, where they're like, I think I know Taylor Swift. I feel like she's my best friend because I see so much of her life and I read her messages and whatever. And that is an example of someone having a parasocial relationship with Taylor Swift. Yeah. And what we are trying to do, what you're trying to do, is essentially create that parasocial relationship, which is a lot more scalable than going out for lunch, and saying, if I be really authentic and put more of myself out there, it's more likely that people will feel like they know me, feel like they can trust me, and therefore be more inclined to invest.
Absolutely. And from there, they understand you, they understand the business, they understand the products and the market. And the more they understand the whole, you know, chain, a golden thread, if you like, of your business, the more likely they will invest.
Fantastic. All right, well, we could talk about this for hours, but you've got places to be. But Simon, thank you very much for sitting down with me.
Thank you very much.